Commissioner Stoll, can you hear us?
Recording in progress.
For the affordable units. You ready? Okay. Okay, everybody, good evening and welcome to the Oregon City Planning Commission meeting of August 12th, 2024. And I'd like to call the roll at this point, and I guess we will start with Chair Stoll.
Present.
Daphne West.
Here.
Carla Laws.
Here.
Dirk Schlagenhofer.
Here.
Brandon Dole.
Here.
And
Okay.
yeah,
Bob LaSalle.
Bob LaSalle. Why did I? So I'm sorry, Bob.
Oh, that's okay. I'm here.
I'm really sorry about that.
That happened at a commission meeting the other night, too. They forgot one of the
I just
commissioners.
completely spaced it. Okay. So we have the approval of the minutes, and are there any comments on the July 22nd, 2024 meeting minutes?
I thought they looked really good.
Anybody else? Can I get a motion?
A motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion to approve and seconded. I'll call the roll. Greg Stoll. Chair Stoll.
Aye.
Daphne West.
Aye.
Carla Laws.
Aye.
Dirk Schlagenhofer.
Yes.
Brandon Dole.
Aye.
And Bob LaSalle.
Aye.
And I say aye as well. I'm assuming that there are no public comments for this evening's hearing or meeting.
Correct, there's no one online for public
Okay.
comment.
And next we have presentations. Is there a presentation?
There are no presentations, and we do not have any public hearings tonight.
Okay, so we'll go right down to discussion items and start out with the Park Place concept plan. And that has been a continued item from the last couple of hearings.
Correct, yes. So Pete Walters here tonight to present the last two chapters for your review or re-review, so.
Hi, good evening, Planning Commissioners. Sorry I missed you at the last meeting. I was on vacation. But I gather you all had a productive one, so that's great. Yeah, as Quilla mentioned, tonight we are going over two chapters of code, and let's get control of this. There we go. We're going to be spending a fair amount of time talking about park and trail standards this evening, but before we get to that, we have one new definition, and we're going to be talking through the neighborhood commercial zone revisions that we have made based on your input. And I'm just going to skip over the background slides because you've seen those before. Some background on the Park Place plan being adopted and what has changed in the meantime. As you know, state land use regulations have changed. And we have also reviewed a master plan application that illuminated where we needed to make some code amendments for clear and objective standards. And based on 11 key elements within the concept plan. And now we'll just dive right into the code. So I gather there was a request to have a new definition for a shed roof. And we have new definitions for several roof types, but this was not one of them. So looked up the various codes and the planning definitions, and we found one that seems to serve the purpose. A shed roof means a roof having a single sloping plane and no hips, ridges, or valleys. So it's just a single plane and it slopes. And that is probably the most wordy definition of a shed roof that I could find. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. Now we'll talk through the neighborhood commercial zone revisions. So as you know, we have discussed several ways to conserve the limited amount of neighborhood commercially zoned land in the Park Place concept plan, which is along Livesey Road there, and it's on both sides of Livesey Road. And we've discussed ways to limit certain uses, in particular the amount of parkland within that area, and also how to limit stormwater facilities. We talked about making them both either prohibiting them or making them a conditional use. So this slide shows what was in the previous draft under conditional uses. But now we have added them to the additional permitted uses section, and I'll show you what those revisions look like. So with the, I need to change up here too, sorry. So the initial standards were modified to allow a greater amount of residential use when combined with a commercial use. We also defined how live-work dwellings would be modified to clarify those uses and structures that are subject only to 1720, and the cap on residential doesn't apply. So under civic uses, we've kept that section, and under we've added off-site stormwater facilities that are less than half an square acre in size is a permitted use, and then is defined as an off-site facility is one that takes stormwater from areas outside of the site that are zoned residential, and includes a public access easement and maintenance agreement requirement, and an improved soft surface trail at least 4 feet wide to provide access to at least 3 benches for public use. And I wasn't here for that discussion, but I gather it is to allow that pond area or retention area to be a public amenity that can be viewable and perhaps serve as an interpretive area. And then parkland and parks in the NC zone would be limited to less than 3/4 of an acre in size. So those were the 2 restrictions added to protect the NC zone land. And if a park or stormwater facility needed more acreage, an applicant would have to apply for a variance. So next up, the next section that we have was the prohibited uses section. And basically, we haven't made any changes to that section. In the revised draft, we have added in the an additional modification was made to allow residential use up to 75% of the total building square footage in the NC zone. And that was based on a concern from the commission that commercial use would not be viable in the location it's identified for, and also because we're having a lot of legislation coming out of the state about housing right now, and that is based on a very real need for housing. At the same time, there was concern that an unlimited allowance for residential use in that zone wouldn't protect the point of the NC zone, which is limited commercial use. So the compromise was to was to increase the amount of residential use to 75% in that zone. Next, we have a minimum landscaping requirement of 20%, and we're specifying what can count towards landscaping in that zone, including landscaping within a parking lot, planter boxes, eco or green roofs, and paved courtyards or plazas with at least 25% of that area used for landscaping. With the new revision, we have added a fifth category for low-impact development stormwater facilities. So the LID is a term used for a variety of approaches, including rain gardens, green roofs, swales, and other methods. And they're typically planted with native species, and they include engineered features to assure that the stormwater from the new impervious surfaces in the development is managed on site to the extent practicable. And since the amount of NC zone land is fairly small, it makes sense to allow such facilities to count towards landscaping. Yes, Bob?
Is that low-impact development in the definitions?
Yes, we already have a definition for low-impact development, and the standards were for those, and the specifications are part of the stormwater and grading design standards that have been adopted. So that's pretty well fleshed out. Sorry. And under the additional permitted uses section in this area, we've already discussed various civic uses that could be permitted. And with the new revision, so we're taking the reference to the maximum footprint for a standalone commercial building of 10,000 to 10,000 square feet out of that section because it's redundant with the dimensional standards section 040, which I don't have here, but it's been removed because it's redundant. Also, off-site stormwater facilities and parklands improvements are added to this section, as we've discussed. And the requirements for an access and maintenance easement and allowance for a soft trail and benches with access. Let's see. Under the residential uses section, this section adds a little more detail, specifying how, previously we'd had a lot of discussion about how to regulate ground floor residential uses. And the intent of sections 2 and 3 was to allow some ground floor residential use behind commercial space, so that those small space commercial uses have priority facing the street on the first floor. And in the revised draft, we've clarified, we took out this part 3, the ground floor, that says ground floor residential building square footage shall not exceed 50% of the ground floor non-residential building square footage. That was just a problematic piece of code, and we were already regulating that because we are permitting upper story residential, live-work dwellings would be not subject to this cap, and we're increasing the amount of residential use space to 75%. Was there any discussion about that? Next draft that we revised is the pedestrian elements section. So there's a variety of pedestrian element choices that an applicant can choose from, with a minimum of 3. And in the, let's see, I've got to keep, yeah, there we go. In the revised draft, it had previously stated that if they choose a canopy as an option, it has to be the entire length of the building, and that's just not practical. So we changed that to 50% of the width of the building. And a canopy or an awning or overhang that projects into either a public utility easement or a right-of-way has to get a permit from Public Works. So that's just specifying that. And that was based on input from the Public Works Department, I assume. We had comments about the sitting space element, dining area, benches, garden wall, or ledges. It had to be a minimum of 16 inches in height and 30 inches in width. And there's various options there. We had public art that incorporates seating, landscape treatments, and enhanced architectural details. The revision, based on your input, was to remove the seating requirement from the public art one, and then specify that sitting space be include ADA accessible seating. So now we're going to be talking about the new park and trail dedication standards. And the purpose of these are to have some clear and objective requirements that get to a proportional requirement for parks and trails based on the size of the development. And that would implement the north and south parks, the north park being a community-sized park and the south park being a neighborhood park. So in the North Village Community Park, which is 8 acres, the revised draft has some new language. We're specifying that the minimum size dedication for that park must be at least 3 contiguous acres, except that any proportional share calculated pursuant to that formula that came to, if it was less than 8 acres, they could pay that in fee in lieu. Kept the park dimensions of width and depth of 500 feet. The new requirements are that with the application, we're asking for a shadow plat, and we may need to define that a little more, or a contiguity, basically a connectivity analysis that shows how the development will provide the parks that are in the adopted documents. So that shadow plat would indicate where the boundaries of the future parkland would be located and serve as an indicator for park dedication and future applications. And in the North Village Park area, if a proposed land division does not abut the park or the shadow plat, then the applicant may pay a fee in lieu. And if it does abut the parkland or the shadow plat, the applicant would dedicate that land.
Just before we go on, I just want to make a note that we've been working with our Parks Department on this language, but we need to get some further clarification. kind of specific to what some of the assumptions they made when they did the Parks Master Plan. And the other piece is eventually they're going to be working on new SDC rates for, to apply to residential development for parks. And so we want to just make sure that the assumptions that they're going to use and that work will match up with the assumptions that we're putting into the land use. So at this point in time, we feel comfortable with this language, and our parks folks have reviewed it, but it may look a little different when it comes back to you for the legislative hearing. So I just wanted to point that out.
So that's why I kind of thought it was in a weird place, because I thought maybe that those standards could be placed in a more universally applicable part of the code that could, overarch into other parts, other master plans and that kind of thing. So all your stormwater requirements are all in one place, so that when you look up stormwater requirements, what an engineer needs to require for that, they can find them in that part of the code instead of in the neighborhood commercial part.
So we've transitioned from neighborhood commercial, and
Yeah.
this code will show up in our site plan and design review, and then it will also be mirrored in the subdivision code.
Yeah, because it just seemed kind of odd to have public access easement and maintenance agreement and an improved soft surface trail at least 4 feet wide. Those are good requirements to have in that zone, but I would think that would universally apply to other zones and probably should be in the...
Okay, so you're referring to a code a couple slides back.
Yeah.
And
Sorry, yeah.
oh, that's okay. And the reasoning behind that is that if our neighborhood commercial land was going to be used for off-site stormwater,
Right.
that stormwater facilities are often fenced and kind of removed from public access.
Okay.
And so that felt like it was kind of taking away some of the purpose of having that urban development, Main Street feel and getting some kind of interaction with the public. So we wanted to make it really specific in, if in the neighborhood commercial area, in Park Place, and we're trying to just keep this really specific to the Park Place concept plan, that if a development needs to use commercial land for a stormwater facility, which then takes away the ability to use it for anything else, what is the public going to get out of that? Can they get some kind of amenity? And so that would be in the form of some kind of a trail. And that would then, the idea was it would somewhat mitigate that loss of kind of that commercial civic land.
Right. Okay. All right.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. So the next section deals with the South Neighborhood Park, which is next to Donovan Road. And this is going to be a long way off, timing-wise. But so that is a smaller park. It's 4 acres in size. It's pretty much a flat area, and where the park is shown in the concept plan comprises a couple of different tax lots. So in terms of the size of that, we've added the following language in the revised draft: the 2 contiguous acres, and then the same language with respect to a shadow plat requirement, meaning so that you can set up future development to continue the park dedication based on the overall size. So that's the South Neighborhood Park revision. And then this is basically just language specifying open space,
Pete, there's a question.
Yes.
Maybe I should have waited till when you were done. So last week or 2 weeks ago, I thought the minimum park acre size that they accepted in Oregon City was 3 acres. So I understand you want 4 acres, but two acres to make, and you worked with the parks. What did they say on that? They didn't, it's changed? Maybe it's changed.
I think that may not have changed. Well, we'll need to get more input on that from Parks.
Yeah, we did ask them, but
Yeah.
I don't think that specific question got answered. We were focused on other things, but we'll continue to chase that
Okay.
down.
I just was curious why.
Yeah. I think, but yeah, we'll flesh it out with Parks, but I think my thinking at the time was because the 2 tax lots in the South Neighborhood Park are under different ownership, and they're like 2 acres each. So that was kind of my impetus for doing it. But, you know, I think specifying 3 acres is not going to be a problem, most likely, but we'll definitely get input on that. Mm-hmm. So let's see, on open space, this was basically a code section that was permissive, and it was just clarifying how open space should be dedicated, but it's not required, unlike the parks and trails piece. We have existing natural resource overlay district code, which includes a variety of options to specify ownership and maintenance of open space. And we already have submittal requirements spelled out in our administration and procedures section. So this would be redundant. And a development application could propose open space through other means other than publicly dedicating it, for example, as private homeowners association open space. And that would be worked out separately without having to go through a land use process. But then, now we're going to be talking about the trails dedication. So most of this language is very new, and we haven't really discussed any of this yet. We talked about how we're working with the park staff because we've got a 2024 Parks Master Plan. It's going to be coming before you as a legislative review. There's a methodology that they're using to figure out all kinds of park amenities and what the national standards are and where Oregon City sits in relation to these national standards and where parks and trails are deficient throughout the city. And we want to make sure that the methodology that we're using is consistent with any methodology that they're using in that parks update, as well as for system development charge purposes as well. So what's in the code currently is a national standard of 0.35 miles of trail per 1,000 residents, and that may increase based on the input from the Parks Department. And this would be, we also need to be looking at census information, and we may, rather than just have one household size, we could have a different average household size based on different housing types. Currently, we have 2.5 people per household. And so for a 50-unit subdivision, that would work out to about 230 feet of trail, just doing that math. But we will be looking at this further as we go forward. Second.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner LaSalle.
Item 3, trail dedication standards, A, the second paragraph there, the specific locations of trails may change and is subject to on-site verification and design at the time of development. Should we have something in there about who can make that decision?
Well, with these standards in place, it'll be part of a subdivision review, and that's the time we would look at the location, and Parks would too, and make a determination as to the right, that location.
Put closer to your mic.
So we would review that at the time of a subdivision review to make sure that the location works and it works with the street grid and other standards that we look at when we're doing subdivision review. Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Okay. So the New Trails dedication section has a pretty extensive purpose statement, which is here. The purpose statement is intended to talk about the requirement for a clear and objective standard, as well as how it's implementing the Park Place concept plan. And it would also provide the background and what this trails plan is based on. And that includes the 2004 Oregon City Trails Master Plan, as well as the Oregon City Transportation System Plan and the OC 2040 Comprehensive Plan, which they have trails maps that build off one another, so that's clearer. Next section that we added is an applicability section. So the trails dedication requirements apply to new residential land divisions, with partitions and subdivisions. And they do not apply to development applications within the NC neighborhood commercial zone. In those cases, a fee in lieu of dedication may be proposed. And they wouldn't apply in the case of an adjustment request that is approved through a discretionary master plan process, which is a planning commission decision. Or if a variance is approved from the standard by the planning commission. So in those situations. This is an excerpt of the 2004 Oregon City Conceptual Trails map, existing and proposed trails. And what I've done here is zoomed in on the Park Place area. And these trails, L7, which is the Livesey Creek Trail, L2 is the Holcomb Ridge Trail, and L5 is the Park Place Creek Loop. These trails are also in the adopted transportation system plan and in the Park Place concept plan, and are referenced in the code section. So the code revision states that the location of trails within the Park Place concept plan shall follow the adopted 2004 Trails Master Plan for those trails that I just mentioned. And as we talked about, that would be subject to further review during the time of subdivision review. The next section you see there is the current adopted trail length requirement based on the 2023 master plan. We got it at 0.35 miles of trail per 1,000 residents. That equates to 1.8 feet of linear trail per resident. This could change based on revisions to the Parks and Trails Master Plan. The next trail standard is a slope standard that dictates when you're looking at the map that we looked at and the accompanying narrative in the Trails Master Plan, we call those the from to points. Basically, if the rise from end to end is over 3%, as defined by the ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act, a trail may be a soft surface trail. And if the rise from end to end is under 3%, a trail shall be a hard surface trail. So we struggle with how much detail to put into this section, since there's a lot of detail and specifications in the master plans already. And we're basically settling on length, width, and slope, and surface. And the rest we would defer to the park's plans, but these are the clear and objective standards that we're using for dedication. As far as the width, for a soft surface trail, would be 5 feet minimum. Surface materials shall be quarter minus gravel or bark dust, and the minimum width for a hard surface trail shall be 10 feet. Surface materials to be of asphalt or concrete.
Pete?
Yes.
I'd keep that open-ended to add a little more flexibility.
Pardon?
I'd keep the type of materials for trails more open-ended.
Okay.
More flexibility, because maybe you might want to do like crushed granite or crushed basalt,
Just
or
add some additional.
other than just like the 3/4 minus.
Yeah.
You know, in some applications, it'd be better to even have a softer.
We probably have to list them out, is
Yeah.
my thinking, but we can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Up to you guys, but
Yeah. Okay.
Question.
Commissioner LaSalle.
Would these standards apply to trails throughout the city?
This is just the Park Place concept plans.
And where did those standards come from?
They're based on input from the Parks and Trails master plans and from input from the park staff. Yeah. And there's
I guess my question is, why would the standards be different in Park Place than they would be elsewhere?
They're really not intended to be that much different. They're just specific to Park Place because we need to include some trail dedication language for clear and objective criteria.
That was my next question. Yeah. You did it to make it clear and objective. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and right now we're implementing the Park Place concept plan. That's what we're tasked with doing. Ordinarily, you would adopt a parks master plan and then you would implement it with adopted zoning, right? Let's just take Park Place out of it. If you had, the city right now is going through the process of adopting a new park master plan. That will be citywide. It identifies all the shortcomings of the parks. And then you would amend your zoning code to implement that park plan. And that park plan has some maybe greater or lesser requirements for other parts of the city, but that's beyond the scope of the task that we're charged with right now. And what we're trying to do, because our parks master plan hasn't been adopted yet, we're trying to sort of run them concurrently so we won't have to come back and change the Park Place code when the master plan gets adopted. So what we're trying to do is work with parks to essentially implement the Parks master plan that has yet to be adopted. Does that make sense? I mean, when I say it's been adopted by the City Commission, but it hasn't gone through the land use post-acknowledgement plan amendment process yet. So it is not a land use regulatory document.
I was wondering that.
Does that make sense?
It was just accepted instead of adopted, right?
Yes.
Can I say something? Just one short thing. From the last meeting that I missed the last one, but the previous one, what we talked about was that we're not trying to identify every possible scenario. We're just trying to come up with the clear and objective path so we say a couple things that seem, you know, we point out a couple different types of surface materials that seem like, you know, a good type of trail. And then anything other than that, just to give the applicant a clear and objective path. And then if they want to do something wider or narrower or recycled tires, you know, that would be the discretionary path. So we're not trying to describe every type of trail that can be done. We're just trying to give them a clear path. If they choose not to take that clear path, then it can get more complicated, and we can bring it in here, see if we like it, add some discretion to it.
I just wanted to widen it and add more flexibility.
Well, this is just the baseline.
Sure.
They can do whatever they want if they want to see us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and,
that how it works?
it's something as specific as a trail surface, I'd hate to make someone have to go through a variance process if they wanted to use that. So, you know, if we list it out as an option, I think that's a better way to go as an objective criterion. So, yeah. Great. Thank you. All right. And then the final set of standards here is pretty much just administration of the trails dedication. So if the above standards could not be met, that is the length, width, hard surface, et cetera, cannot be met, then we want to preserve the option to accept a fee in lieu. And that would be set in the park's fee schedule and adopted by resolution. We also wanted to mention in this section that trail dedication may be eligible for system development charge credits if, for example, a developer wanted to build a bigger park and dedicate it and build it ahead, and then they would be reimbursed for those SDC eligible improvements. And we also added in the shadow plat requirement to indicate how the trail would connect to off-site trails, trailheads, and activity areas that are shown on that Trails Master Plan map that I just showed. And specifying that all trails be publicly accessible to all residents, including those with disabilities, and adhere to Americans with Disability Act guidelines where applicable, with easements for public access. And that the applicant propose the entity responsible for ownership and maintenance of the trails, whether it's HOA, city, or other entity, and outline the maintenance standards in their land use application. So that wraps up the trails section that we've drafted so far. Next steps, we're going to have tomorrow night a check-in with the City Commission, kind of give them a high-level overview of the code amendments, similar to the one that we provided to the Citizen Involvement Committee, or Aquila did recently. August 19th, I'll be presenting also to Park Place Neighborhood Association, and we'll be kicking off the actual legislative application process pretty soon here. We want to bring this to the Planning Commission. I think we're shooting for September 23rd.
Yeah,
right?
our goal is to have it, have our first public hearing at the second meeting in September.
And so we have to observe a 35-day public notice for the Department of Land Conservation and Development post-acknowledgement process that Carrie just mentioned, and then also meet our public noticing requirements for that first evidentiary hearing. Thank you. Any questions?
Comments? Sal?
If you go back to page 20, your 1762-061 and 1608-043, this may be wordsmithing, but
Page 20?
page 20,
Okay.
item B1, City Commission should have capital C's and capital C in city and a capital C in commission. And that's true throughout the document. And then on the next page, in item 2, refers to the city. In this context, the city should have a capital C, and that should be throughout the document. It may be little stuff, and I was never an English major, but
That's fine.
it just kind of hit me in the face when I was reading it.
Yeah, okay, we'll take care of it.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's all I had.
Commissioner West?
Who was presenting at the CIC or the Park Place? Staff or who's making the presentations?
I will be making the presentation at the Neighborhood Association meeting, and then
Okay.
Aquila presented to the CIC.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Pete, I've got a couple of things. There is an allowance, or actually, a conditional use permit for a vet clinic. Now, so I was just wondering if you have, because there's vet clinic, there's a pet hospital, there's dog grooming, there's dog boarding, and there's kennels. So you could have a vet clinic that either has dog boarding or not. So I was thinking that the veterinary facilities that don't require dog boarding and noisy dogs and that kind of stuff maybe could be outright in the NC zone, because it's just grooming. It's like a personal service. It's like, you go get a haircut, your dog will get the haircut. It's not a big deal.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah, and I just think that it might facilitate a little more action that way, and people that want to do a dog grooming business aren't faced with a gigantic conditional use permit to have to get through that. Whereas a kennel, noisy dogs, maybe outside, conditional use is appropriate to provide some guidelines to maybe enclose the dogs or mitigate the noise in some way.
Okay.
But
yeah, that's great input. So we can tease out those uses a little more.
I know in my shop that creates a lot of confusion, because a lot of people come through the door with different types of uses, and we have very spirited discussions about what's outright allowed and what isn't,
Yeah.
And so we've kind of parsed that out a little bit, and just wanted to add that on. Next one is mobile food units, and vendors. So I was just wondering if that would include things like mobile detailing, mobile hair salon,
Right now,
dog grooming.
it doesn't. It's a very specific definition for a mobile food unit, because
Okay.
we adopted the code section for those when we were talking about where they should be allowed, and
that's all sussed out then, right?
yeah.
Where it should be and all that. Okay,
Yeah.
great. And then one more. I've got parking lot landscaping. Specific elements. How many trees, islands per number of parking spaces, ground cover. I guess what I don't want to see is, acres of bark dust with some knick in there, and that's it.
Oh, yeah. So in chapter 1752 has all of the landscaping details.
Oh, good, okay.
For
all right, I wasn't
parking
sure.
lots, interior, perimeter, etc., tree spacing, and shrub spacing, and all of those details are in 1752.
Okay, and then finally, under 172450E, there's a provision for an upper story residential use as permitted with no limitation. I thought that was kind of interesting. I wasn't sure what that meant, though.
Yeah.
Well, I think,
172450E.
so, Commissioner.
Residential uses.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, 5, E5, I'm sorry. Very last, upper story residential uses are permitted with no limitation.
That's Thimble Creek.
Yeah, so we added the Thimble Creek section into, because there is a reference somewhere else about Thimble Creek.
Yeah,
And it wasn't in the original revisions we had showed you, so we just added in Thimble Creek.
okay,
But that, so this wouldn't actually apply in
All right.
Park Place.
okay. All right, very good.
Right.
That's all.
I think what Pete's got for upper story units in Park Place is in 1724-060 D.
D, right.
3, upper story residential uses are permitted. And
Okay.
it doesn't say with no limitation.
Okay.
I'm with you, I don't know what with no limitation
I know,
means.
that, it sounds kind of cool,
Like, it
but-
sounds like
yeah.
it's unlimited, it's infinity.
But, okay, very good, thanks. That's all.
Thank you.
Pete, I have a question. For the landscape coverage, the 20%, does that jive with other standards in other areas?
Well, downtown mixed use downtown, I think, is at 10%, much more urban.
Industrial's 15%?
I think so, yes. Yep. So it's close, but I think the mixed-use corridor is 15%. This is a slightly higher allowance, but it does spells out what can count towards that. We could have a
just
discussion
curious.
about whether that's appropriate or not. Yeah.
No, thank you for that. I think that's fine. I was just curious if it
Okay.
jived or consistent or where that number actually came from. 'Cause
Yeah.
it bumped it up from the 15%. So
To 20.
A little bit more rigorous standard.
Yeah, I think that was anticipating having these smaller sites, but allowing parking lot landscaping to count and towards the overall landscaping requirement, as well as LID facilities and that sort of thing.
Yeah. No, I think you've added enough in there to make it easy, including all of those features. I was just curious on the actual
Yeah, sure.
percentage numbers.
Yep.
Any other comments? Okay, so I think at this point we vote for an acceptance of all of the changes of the code and commentary that we've made this evening, with the commentary that we've made this evening. And do you want a roll call for that, or?
No, I don't think we need a vote
Okay.
of any kind. This was really just to circle back and let you know that we'd gotten your feedback, and also to make sure that we had captured all your feedback if there was something that we missed. So we don't necessarily need a vote. But you will get a chance to vote eventually.
Great, okay, no, I wasn't sure how we were going to forward this, so that's fine.
Yeah, it's not necessarily being forwarded yet. You did all the work.
All right.
And we'll come back for the legislative part.
Yeah, and thanks for putting all of that together. It looks really great.
Thank you.
Yeah, that'll be so much better.
Yeah.
So I guess we go to the next item for communications.
Right, and so what I've got for communications right now, at the moment, I'm pretty sure we're not going to have a meeting on August 26th, and we don't have anything on the agenda. And at the moment, I don't have anything planned for September 9th. So we may not be meeting again until September, I think I said 23rd, whatever that second meeting in September is. And so that will be a public hearing. I was just trying to think, you will see the Parks Master Plan as a legislative comp plan amendment fairly soon, but I can't remember exactly when that is. So I'll have to check our scheduling, but so that will be coming up as well.
Okay.
That's all the communications that I have.
So
Commissioner
what was
West?
the date in September you're thinking?
23rd?
Okay.
Anyone else?
I just had a couple things.
Quick question. The gentleman that was here, he was just here to observe, he wasn't here to make comment on the discussion?
Correct,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. I ensured that that was the case before we started. Yeah.
Any other comments for the good of the order?
Yeah.
Commissioner West?
Yeah, I just wanted to share that, that I went to the Home Builder Street of Dreams this past weekend. And it wasn't the typical Street of Dreams with everything in like a whole new, brand new luxury neighborhood. They had all different kinds of housing spread around town. And why my friend and I went is we wanted to look at some of the middle housing they were doing. So we went, it was up in St. John's, and these homes were all built in ranch-style neighborhoods. It wasn't in a commercial, like a lot of apartments and things. So if you, there's 4 examples. One of the examples is in Oregon City. They have a container house here somewhere. I haven't seen it yet. Why I'm saying this, we still have next weekend if any of you want to go see it. But one of the things that we found so interesting was a 5,000 square foot lot that had 4 individual homes on it and 6 feet apart, and how they built them and stacked their windows from one unit to another so you weren't looking window to window or bathroom to bathroom. And they talked about their SDCs and how they've done it and what kind of structure of ownership that these properties were all in. They weren't like for rent. They were all individually for sale, and you owned the land, that kind of thing. So then one other lot was 5,000 square foot. We saw a triplex, and another one was an 850 square foot house, so 850 up to 1,250, 4 units on another lot. So only one of those 3 properties had on-site parking for 1 car each. So that was interesting too. And anyway, it was fun to see. So if you're interested,
That sounds great.
it's coming to you soon in Oregon City.
Commissioner Laws?
If you want to see the container homes, they're on Warner Street off of, right past First City Veterinary Clinic.
That sounded like, kind of like cottage homes, that one little thing you were talking about.
The neighborhood had kind of an adjustment to it at first from the feedback the neighborhood association had, but they were affordable at the time. They were under 400,000 at the time. They're about 700 square feet to 800 square feet, and they are single container homes.
Very good. Anything else? Okay, meeting adjourned.